I'd like to welcome you all to this living series of Shelter in Love. It's a 15-day series, so just a little bit of background for those of you who are joining for the very first time. This is a series that you all have asked for, and the point of the series is that we're going to have conversations and meditation here on two things fundamentally. One is the idea of creating community, and the second thing is about trying to understand the spiritual context of what we're going through and discuss ideas that are at the heart of healing humanity, right? So I have friends here. These are all dear friends for this 15-day series that you're seeing, and you will continue to see over the course of these next, I think we've got about a week left. And these are people that have mattered to me the most in terms of my journey. And with that, I want to share with you this man that you're seeing on the screen here. This is an incredible human being, a dear friend of mine. And he's a person that I always check in with when I'm at a major juncture in my life. I'll explain what I mean by that. About 12 years ago, I had this epiphany one morning. I just woke up, 22nd January 2012. I woke up and I said, this is not what I was in the tech world, very invested in the tech world. I had written 2 books as part of IBM. I was one of the top engineers for North and South America for business intelligence. And then I woke up this morning and I said, I've not been put on this earth to create and sell software. There was a bigger purpose. But then I had this little bit of a fear that was lingering at the back of my mind saying that what would it be like to let go of a career that I have spent, first of all, with 2 engineering degrees, 8 years of education, 12 years of professional experience, and I want to walk away from it. So I was like, there was this battle inside my mind, whether it's a nightmare I just woke up from, or is it really an epiphany that I've been guided to? So I made 3 phone calls that day, one to my parents, one to my teacher of my spiritual teacher, but the third one was to Eric. And I asked Eric, listen, man, I'm feeling this thing. What do you suggest? And he is somebody I respect so dearly, and I'll tell you why. Because he has straddled both the spiritual world and the corporate world for extended periods of time. So 35 years in the CBC, over 35 years as a teacher with the Brahma Kumaris, and now he's the national coordinator for all their centers across Canada. And so he's a man who kind of really rides the horse with his legs straddled on both these spheres of life. And so Eric gave me this precious piece of advice, which I'm sharing with you right now, because if you ever find yourself at this juncture, he said, Jay, if you find yourself capable of financially being independent, go live your dream, follow your path, listen to your heart, you will never regret it. Boom, next day I quit my job. And here we are, folks, 8 years into it. There's no looking back. I could not be more happy. I could not be more grateful for Eric. And Eric and I have this beautiful little ritual, if you will, that we do. We both travel to India for spiritual retreats. And there's one particular place we go for this hike along the ridge of the Aravalli Mountains in the western part of India. So we walk along the ridge chatting for about an hour and a half, 2 hours. And then we end up at this beautiful palace hotel called the Jaipur House. So Jaipur House, for those of you who don't know, is the summer palace of the Maharaja of Jaipur, right on top of this beautiful hill station. And he's got this beautiful palace, which has now been converted into a hotel. And it looks over a lake. And we sit there at the edge of at the lake on top of the mountain, looking over with this palace in the background. And we sip a cup of tea and we discuss all kinds of profound existential questions. And here we are today. I have with you my dear friend, Eric, and we will talk about some more existential things. Welcome, Eric, to the show.
Thank you so much, Jay, for this lovely introduction. I'm glad that you remember that advice, and I'm collecting blessings from you today and not curses for having given you the wrong advice. So thank you.
Yeah. All blessings, my friend, all blessings. So listen, so you straddle a business that we haven't had on the show, which is the media world. And I will just come out up front and say this, that there is so much toxicity that we experience, not because of the pandemic and everything that's going on. There's a virus going around, yes, but the news that is coming, the fear mongering that is spreading, it is something that is basically, whether you're being affected by the pandemic, whether you're maintaining social distancing or not, we're all being succumbed to this other, toxicity. Could you talk to us a little bit about understanding where is this? How do we, where is this? How are we allowing this into our psyche? Understanding the pain that comes from it, and how do we protect ourselves?
Well, it's a big world. The media world is such a big, diverse world as well. And I think now we're into a system where consuming news becomes more and more one's own responsibility. If you remember, like a long time ago, I was younger, when you wanted to watch the news, you had just 2-3 options. There was very few options. Today, we have an amazing amount of sources available. And most of the new generation don't even have a television at home. They were born, there was no television in the house, and there will never be a TV in their house. They are raised with a phone in their hands and computer in front of themselves. And the access of information on the net is not the same as sitting in front of a television and just flapping through a few channels. Let me tell you first a little bit how I came into this world of the media, and you see what I'm trying to say. For me, I came in spirituality and in the media, both through the back doors. I didn't go through the front door at all. And when I was 21 or 23, I think maybe, I was in Western Canada, in Alberta, and I was a bit rebellious in my head. I wanted to understand the world. And, when I was 14, I saw my dad watching the end of the world every night on television, wars and this and famine and so many things happening, I'm talking in the 70s. And I would be outraged, and I was 14, and I used to tell my dad one day, I remember he was with the feet on the little table, his glass of wine, watching bad news going on. And I was watching these people killing each other. And I told my dad, so what are you doing? That's it? Mister, he's having his little drink of wine and, that's it. And you're doing nothing. And my poor dad, he must have had worked so hard for the whole week, the whole month, just to pay our big house that he built for us. And here I am telling you, what are you doing about it? You're just watching this news and doing nothing about it. So that's the beginning of my relationship with the media. When I saw the war and the bad things on TV and thinking, we're not doing anything about it. So he just told me, go and do your homework in your room and don't bother me anymore. So years later, when I was in Alberta, was applying for any kind of job. I was really broke. I had no money. I just went there to learn English. I quit my study in veterinary in school. And so I applied to everything that had the word Canada in it because I speak French. So I understood in Alberta, they looked for people who speak French, bilingual. So I applied to everything, Petro Canada, Air Canada, Radio Canada, as I speak French, by the way, I can do something. And I was expecting to be hired to wash the windows or sweep the floor. And they called me and they were desperate to find French-speaking people who can work in the newsroom. They said, do you want to be a journalist? And I laughed. I was not even watching news at all in my life at that time. I said, sure, that's exactly what I want to do. Total lie. And I went through the back door. When they saw how I knew nothing, I just came back from France. I couldn't remember what's the difference between a prime minister. We do have vice presidents here. I was mixed up between French, American, Canadian systems. But I found a lady who was running the newsroom was born in the same village as the one I was born in. So we connected and she said, Eric, don't ask questions to anybody else, just to me, and I'll help you. So I went through all the learnings of the media. And to me, everything was totally crazy in that world when I started, because at the same time, I was learning to meditate, to be peaceful, to be kind, to be innocent, to be generous. And it was like black and white. In the morning, I would meditate and feel, zen, and I love the world and the world loves me. And I go into the newsroom and it would be like war and rush. And, they would tell me the first time I read the news, that thing on air, I was reading it as a meditation commentary. Today, the prime minister, I said, Eric, they're going to fall asleep. This is not meditation. This is like news. You have to be aggressive. I said, no, I cannot be aggressive. This is not spiritual. But I'll be enthusiastic. Okay, I'll be more enthusiastic. So I know it's a long story, but I went like this. I learned the reality of that world, but I always felt I don't belong to the news. That's not my thing. And one day there was this election campaign, and our prime minister was doing what all the prime ministers do. He has his big boss, and that was the day Radio Canada had to do the interview in French, the official interview. And the reporter, who is the very senior reporter, I was 23, zero in seniority in CBC, but I was in Edmonton, in Alberta. And the big reporter on the morning of the interview fell really sick. So last minute, they called the newsroom and they said, who can do the interview with the prime minister? It has to be today. We can't change it. And everybody looked around and said, well, maybe Eric. I was the least qualified person. I said, me? The prime minister? What are we talking about? They said, well, it's international affairs. I said, I know nothing about international affairs. So they gave me a few questions. I ended up, and I'll make it short, I ended up sitting with the prime minister. It was supposed to be 20 minutes. And I was very honest with them. I said, I know nothing, but sorry, I'm replacing for the one you know. And I played the card of being very innocent. And he went on about this Russian, Canadian, American politics. And I says, why did you do this? I mean, I would have never said that to the prime minister or to this guy. And he was very engaging. And the communication agent said, okay, that's enough, 20 minutes. And the prime minister said, stop. No, this is very interesting. Let's go on. We went for an hour and a half. The interview was sent to Montreal, was edited. Everybody keep asking, who is this reporter who asked us the dumbest question to the prime minister? Like, gosh, we removed the question. That is a good thing. But he said things that he would never say otherwise. I came back home on that evening and I was shaking, thinking, what did I do? I sat with the prime minister for an hour and a half. Here's the interview, and I was watching at 10 o'clock at night, and they broadcast it. It went very well. I got a lot of compliments, although they told me we have to figure out your technique of interviews. My point was that on that day, that's when I understood media power. I understood on that day, one day I can go and meet a lady that I've never met in my life, who is she's holding a grocery store on the corner street. She tells me her life. She will cry in front of me. She will tell me, I'm telling you things I've never told anyone in my life. I will leave, I will hold it in my arms, we'll cry together. It will be a human story. Next day, I'll meet the prime minister and we'll talk about international affairs. I realized how privileged I was to be a journalist and to have access to anyone basically in the world and to tell the story. But I also realized that how I was as an individual was part of the story. If I had been a very senior journalist with a very articulated brain, it would have been good, no doubt. I don't critic at all that, criticize that. But because I was so innocent, I was so, naive in a way, and so candid, like so genuine in my approach to this prime minister, he gave a totally different response. I mean, his attitude towards me was very, very different than it would have been to an official senior journalist. And I realized media is a living organism and I'm part of it. And when people say, for example, well, the media is doing this and doing that, I say, yeah, but now we're all part of it. How I consume it and how I make it, to me, is both responsibilities. So producing media, producing stories is it's an incredible privilege. And I still do it 35 years later and I love it. But how we protect ourselves from what is being told to us, that becomes my own responsibility. I know a lot of people who tell me, oh, I don't go on the media anymore. It's always negative, always negative. I say, well, how did you design your Facebook profile? What do you like? How do you select what you like? My Facebook journal has a lot of very interesting news in it, things that I discovered that are very positive. I subscribe, of course, to all the positive news, and CNN even has a very wonderful positive news update every day by email. But I try to understand that I become part of the news based on who I am, and I consume the news based on who I am. And that's where I connected my spiritual journey with my work, my role in the media. And I know in Radio Canada where I work, I mean, I think I do the correct job. You know, I know the standards of journalism to be fair, etc. But I also understand that the values that you carry with you will shape the style of the news that you create. And I have so much admiration for some of the top reporters in the world that have uncovered stories in a war zone, in rural areas, in cities, everywhere around the world, and why they went for these stories against pressure from economics, from the news director, from the public, and what works, what doesn't work. It was their passion. To work in a war zone, at some point you need to have something in you that is passionate to do something good for the world. You know, you don't go there just for fun. Your life is at risk. Those who are digging, I started with the big news director. We launched an investigative unit at Radio Canada 15 years ago, I think now, or 10 years ago. It is a tough job. You know, investigative journalism is really, really tough. And I think when sometimes people criticize the media, I think sometimes we should really look at all the good that the media is doing at the same time. And I really, really strongly believe that media produces tremendous amount of good stories and powerful stories that are shaping the world and making the world a better world. But there are also a lot of media who produce bad stuff. My point will be, what will be the criteria for me as a consumer to like or dislike certain type of news? I think now we have in most serious media, at least in Canada and CBC, we do have that. We have units that are specifically designed to analyze what's happening in the media world and to help viewers to know if it's right or wrong, not right or wrong, but true or false, like the fake news. We have two special units in Radio Canada. That's the only thing they do. They take things from Facebook, from here, from there, from American news a lot, and they say, well, this is what's being said. We'll tell you, we'll analyze it, and we'll tell you the facts. I think we have access to a lot of these very good shows at the moment, helping us to digest the news. So the viewer has to be really, really careful. Now when we go in the market and then you have all kind of food available, it's my responsibility to pay attention what food I'm going to buy. And I'm not going to buy junk food and then complain, oh, I ate this and I'm not feeling good. Well, you bought it and you ate it. That's your responsibility. So it may seem a little bit hard, but I want to stress that, yeah, news media is producing strange and negative things, but also positive things. Consumer has to select where I'm getting the information from. And today, after all these years, when I remember going in the newsroom, so naive, and after this interview with the Prime Minister, I look back at it and I think this shaped me so well in still enjoying the world of media and bringing hope in the media. So we maintain that flame, understanding that democracy in the world is dependent on proper information. And who is going to produce proper information is media people. Now, where I like to join all these things together is based on the values that we cultivate. And that's why we have groups. I was part of one called Images and Voices of Hope, where we pay attention to nurturing the values in a newsroom. And what are the values that you want to nurture in a newsroom? And for me, this is an essential part of healthy newsroom. I know not everybody is paying attention to it. Some newsroom have no culture of values at all, but I know some newsroom have very good, culture of values at the same time. It's a long answer, sorry, to your question.
So essentially what I got out of it basically is that there are certain media companies that are putting a whole lot more emphasis on being able to decipher and help us consumers know what's true or not. And I honestly, this is the first time I've heard that somebody's taking the pain and the effort to weed through and tell us what is true or not. So what I really got out of this conversation, just to be very, very honest, is that we need to be listening to more of Canadian Broadcasting Corporation shows because
Yeah.
where I am,
You can say that. You can say that. I can. I'm also, a CBC employee, and
Right.
I don't underestimate the work of many, many journalists around the world. American journalists are very well known and have done incredible things. But I also know that there are sources of information that are very toxic and dangerous and terrible. And when I see, we have a show, I don't know how to translate it, it's called encrypting, so decrypting. So we call it the decrypting show. And sometimes when you see what are the intentions of people spreading fake news, it's sickening. The mind is really needs for massive repair here. And that's nature of human beings. So I think we have to be very careful. And, I used to eat a lot of junk food when I was a kid, and I used to like it. And one day when you realize that you're really eating poison, then you pay attention. And now I spend a lot of time when I do, my groceries, reading labels and thinking, am I going to buy something without reading the labels? So the same thing when you buy news, I would really encourage people to read the labels. Where does it come from? Who is doing it? What's the culture of that news agency? And there are very, very good news agencies. I mean, of course, no one is perfect. Everybody makes mistakes, and sometimes there are biases, of course, but we know certain sources of journalism today are still very, very good. And if we want to hear the positive side of what's happening, we can hear it. And today, what we're going through is a very good example, because the situation in the world today is not, with one layer. It's not one reality. The reality that someone is living at the moment in an intensive care unit, saving lives, working 20 hours a day, having 3 kids at home, and wondering if you're going to put your kids in danger because you're a doctor. The reality of that person, I can't even imagine what it is really, because it's not my reality. And on the other side, you have people at home saying, this is the best thing that could ever happen to me in my life. I have a salary, I'm paid, I do nothing except I have time for myself to face my existence, contemplate the spring happening and the new bees happening and the flowers opening. Wonderful for you. This is a spectrum of realities. So when I want to know what's happening with COVID-19, what is the reality I'm consuming? And I feel personally that this is my responsibility to go and look for information, because if I just tune on one channel or one source of information, I don't know if I'm going to get the real picture. And you're right, sometimes they will just flood you with an abundance of news. If you listen to the news today, 99% of the news is only about the pandemic. What's happening in Syria? What's happening with the migrants around the world? What's happening, in so many places in Africa that we don't hear about anymore? It didn't stop. Syria's war is still going on, and we don't hear about it. So it's my duty to search for right type of information and to select. I would suggest that consumers have to approach news the same way they approach their diet. And maybe it's time, yes, to change the news, but if consumers change their diet, news producers will change the products. Look in America and in Canada is the same. The word vegan wasn't known at all 10 years ago. I mean, I became vegetarian and I was a lunatic at the time. I was in the hippie, happy time of becoming vegetarian. But it was very hard to find vegetarian products. Suddenly this vegan, gluten-free has happened, and suddenly all our stores have filled with gluten-free products and vegan products, and say, wow, okay, the business has picked up. And I'm not sure if, again, the actual figures, but when I read the amount of Americans who are planning to change their diet this year in 2020 and turning towards reducing tremendously the amount of meat or going vegan or vegetarian, I mean, the meat industry is getting a wake-up call at the moment, and they will have to adjust. So consumers hold part of the reality, not just those who are producing the news. It's my opinion. I don't know if maybe some
Yeah.
Intellectuals would argue with me, but that would be my take.
That's absolutely, completely agree. We have the power with our purchasing power. We have the ability to sway businesses, whether it's in terms of they're producing actual physical content or in this case, media content. I completely agree. Our clicks and what we pay attention to, our attention is a big currency. I completely agree that we vote with that currency as to where the world is going to go.
Mm-hmm.
I completely agree. So
you said I can give you if you have time, I can give you an example. In 2011, it was the 10th anniversary of 9/11, and just to illustrate exactly what we're talking about, where people think 10 years 9/11, oh my God, we're going to do it again, And I knew people out there are sick at that time. Imagine after 10 years of being towers falling down, people were getting a little bit tired of being given that all the time. So the news directors asked me, we want you to produce a special show, commemoration of the 10th anniversary of 9/11. And my reaction was, oh gosh, not again, we've done it every year. And I thought about it. So I went into my other world, into my meditation zone. And I thought, what is my duty as a media person? And I knew the options. I could do the 10th anniversary and showing the towers falling down and then this. And I knew that was already, the script was made already and very predictable. Or I could dare proposing something else. And I dared, and I produced, and I proposed the news. I told them, okay, I'll do it. One condition, you give me, blank heart to go where I want. And I'm never going to show the towers falling down. I'm never going to show the dust and the ashes and the tragedy. But we're going to call it 10 years later, Where is Hope? I said, whoa, do you want to do that? I said, yeah, we'll do 10th anniversary, Where is Hope? And so they didn't know. And so we had a big crew. We had some people in Afghanistan, some, of course, in New York and everywhere. And then I called everyone and I said, I want you to focus on positive stories. And some were very reluctant. They said, Eric, I'm in Afghanistan. There's nothing positive here. I said, well, search for it. And that is a top senior journalist I was talking to. I looked like a kid compared to him. As that anybody like me? He said, Eric. I said, well, just give you 2-3 days and then we'll talk about it. He found an incredible story of resilience for women and a new school for women opening in Afghanistan. We found out that the Quebecer artists were supposed to exhibit their work on 9/11. 10 years later, all these artists had a life transformation, complete life transformation because of the trauma, but they all bounced into very positive stories. So we did a show, 9/11, 10 years later, what about hope? And we got so many comments from people, the viewers, who said, when I saw 10th anniversary, I almost turned off the page. I didn't want to hear anything, but I saw the word hope. And just because of that word, I looked at your show, and that was, very, very interesting. And thank you for giving us that hope. So again, the values, and I joked so much with the news at the anchor because they knew me. I was on the newsroom all the time saying, okay, this is a bad news. Where's the hope? Is there a solution? Can we talk about solution? Can we talk about hope? So one day the news anchor was funny because, it's a big show at 10 o'clock at night. And she had this, the economist guy who shows up with all these figures every night. It was very depressing on that day. And because she didn't stop herself, and she just almost jokingly said to him, so what about hope? And he was so surprised with that question that would never ask me this question. This is not, but she forgot because we always joke in a newsroom, oh, Eric, yeah, he always wants to know about hope. So she just ended up on that evening asking about hope. So I think it's a contagious virtue or value, which we should not underestimate. And it's there in the news, so watch for it.
Yes. Well, talk about hope. Can you lead us into a state of being from wherever we are into a deep state of hopefulness through a meditation exercise, please?
Already? Yeah. It is, we start talking, and before we know, we have to stop.
So now you know why the Prime Minister wanted you on that talk. You think you don't have talent? You got a lot of talent, bro.
No, I have also French habits, so they talk a lot, French people. So anyway, thanks for giving me the time. Yes, sure. If you want, we can go on for a beautiful meditation together. And maybe I'll invite all of us to contemplate this word of hope. So the way I like to meditate, and I'll invite all our friends here with us to do the same. I find that keeping the eyes open is very useful in meditation. It may be a bit contrary to some of our tendency, but just to be alert, to be present, and to be together right now, and to move into a space of quietness, but not escaping the world, not by going away from the reality, but staying in our reality, staying in the world as it is, wherever we are sitting now in our room, just taking a moment to be very present. Think of where we are, maybe in a city or in a countryside, a house or apartment. Let's take a moment to just visualize where we are right now in the world. And becoming aware of our presence. Sometimes when we walk on the street, there are many maybe less beautiful scenes of garbage and pollution. But sometimes you pass by a little front garden and you notice that someone has planted beautiful flowers, greens. And what if in the world I am that flower? And by being aware of where I am now, just being aware of my presence in the world, maybe I am this unique being, this very special being. Who may just need a little bit of time to grow and to bloom. And just being aware of the present moment, where I am and who I am, feels like I'm nurturing, I'm taking care of that unique being. And the silence that I'm allowing to fill the room with, that silence is the power of the flower. Flowers can bloom even on a battlefield. So I, as a being, as a unique being in this world, I want to let silence bring beauty in who I am. Because that silence allows me to think differently. Silence can make my thoughts peaceful, quiet. Silence gives me power, strength. And only when I feel that inner strength can I have hope for the future. As if I don't even expect hope from the outside. But I become part of that hope for the future. And I know that my inner strength, my inner peace can bloom on the battlefield of the world and bring beauty, meaning, purpose, hope. I am a unique being. And I cherish this uniqueness. I am me. And I have a lot to offer to the world. Just being who I am. Just with this feeling of wanting to care for myself. Paying attention to nurturing this inner silence, that inner strength. And when I grow in that silence, I become like a spiritual lighthouse. And my duty is just to give light. A signal of light. A ray of hope. So I embrace the silence. I rediscover how beautiful my thoughts could be. Just when I can make my mind quiet, peaceful. All my inner virtues, the deepest values at the core of the soul, start to surface again. And they want to come out. Like the first flowers in the winter, just want to go through the snow and show their beauty. My inner peace, my inner love, my inner hope. They grow in silence and they bloom in silence.
Wow, that was so beautiful to switch from
Yeah.
a deep conversation about the toxicity of media to I really enjoyed the metaphor of the flowers that blossom on a battlefield. I think that's so powerful. I think if you see it in the context of how this world, with all the information and just the daily struggle of life, and then you realize that you can sow the seeds and there will be flowers. It's just what you tend to that's going to blossom. That's beautiful. So with that, I would like to invite folks to please put your Q&A questions into the there's a little window there on Zoom for Q&A. And those of you who joined us through YouTube, you're welcome to go post your questions in the comment section. I have a friend who's bringing the questions from the YouTube into Zoom. So I have already one question from Zoom here. It's from Chemo. And Chemo is asking, can we go beyond the idea that we vote with our dollars? We can look into changes we can make to actively support local production of things we need, especially food. Great ideas here. So I don't think it's really a comment what he's saying. All right, so Eric, I have a question for you. So you talked about how the passion of the storyteller, the media person, has so much to do with the show that they create and the content that they produce and put out there. And I know you're a major emissary of love, which is, in a way, it's almost so non-existent in the mainstream media today. And share with us a story of where love was demonstrated at your workplace, or a story that you were able to tell.
Are you ready for all kind of stories, but one thing I always discovered, and I know because I've been passionate and fascinated and really drawn to this idea that we have an incredible capacity in ourselves, the soul or the brain or the spirit can really be, so much better. And I was maybe so crooked and so defective in my, 20s, and I felt so broken as an individual that I knew I needed to be repaired. So I believed very strongly in changing the self, the ability to improve, to become a better person, to develop values, to turn down a little bit the heat of negativity in myself. And I had to work on myself a lot. And so whilst learning how to really change myself and coping with my own inner demons, I was working with people that sometimes just tend to push your buttons and make you even worse than you were before. And so when I was working, so one thing that I always felt that, in a newsroom or in a corporate environment, usually, and more we're told to be respectful. And the value of respect is very, very strong. And I always felt, yeah, respect is working well in the corporation, but in my spiritual journey, it's more than respect. It's how can you love people? And I know it would sound very strange in the newsroom to tell someone, I really love you. They will be really freaked out and not go with that at all. You can respect. Don't tell people you love them. They will take it very strangely. But in spirituality, maybe you don't say it, but you have to feel it. I'm giving you the context because you will understand where I'm coming from. My goal is not just to respect people, but it's to really express spiritual love, like the loving nature, not just, okay, I hate you, but I respect you. That's not spiritual. Spirituality means I know you're very different and I know you make me crazy, but I'm going to overcome that. And I'm going to learn to love you because that's what the big masters have told us to try and to do. So I'm in the West as a journalist. And so I become producer and I asked the headquarters send me a journalist. And so one day I heard that the journalist they're sending me is known to be probably the worst case scenario in Montreal that nobody wants to work with. And I heard a month later that the big boss said, what can we do with this journalist? I mean, nobody can work with him. He's a good journalist, but I won't say the word, but you can imagine, really a pain to everybody else. Let's send him to the Buddhists in the West. And if the Buddhist doesn't handle him, well, then that will be the last chance. And I told my boss a month later, I'm not a Buddhist. I mean, I'm happy you call me like that, but I'm not a Buddhist. Say whatever you are, you are Zen. If you don't handle this guy, nobody else will. Thank you. This is a good gift you're sending me. So this guy shows up in Edmonton. I don't know him at all. I just know he has already fairly bad reputation. And I'm told if he's not behaving well, you just move your little finger and he's out of there. And so the first shoot we go on, and it was about a very tricky subject, he just burst it. During the filming, he started yelling at me in front of all the guests that were very high profile intellectuals in Alberta at the time. And he treated me like no one in front of people. And I had to stop the shooting, tell the guy, sorry, we'll just go out, we'll be right back. And I go outside and I said, are you out of your mind? What are you doing? This is like, you can't behave like this. And I said, don't forget, I do this, you're out of here. We went through a lot of struggle. It was I try my best to love this guy. I try to work with him. It was very tough. Like sometimes we'll get along, but most of the time he will push my buttons and we would go a bit crazy. And the worst scenario was when we had to work on the story, the structure of the story. And one day I was working with him. I tried hard. He had like big problems, with alcoholism and stuff like that. So I tried to help him go with the gym, to the gym with him to motivate him. I have to say, he was a talented guy. His way of writing was number one. And yeah, he was a good guy, but my goodness, like hard to go with. So one night we were working late in the office, trying to sort out this story, how we're going to tell the story, how we're going to put it together. Our technique was, because he's a chain smoker, he would be on the sidewalk, we'd be on our cell phones, and we'll talk, and I'll be in the office and see him from over there. So then he came into the office and we had this big board trying to tell the story. And he's just pushing me way beyond my limits. And my anger, hate, ego, everything is just about to explode. We're just about to explode. And I'm trying to be a good yogi, but the yogi is dead. He just killed the yogi. So I tell him his name was Bertrand. And it says, Bertrand, stop it. We have to stop it. There's only two options now. The first one, which is really going to happen, I'm going to take your head and it's going to go right through the drywall. And I'm going to do it because I just can't do it anymore. Or the second thing which is going to happen, is we just quit. That's it. I can't take it anymore. I'm moving my finger. You're out of here tomorrow morning. I call Montreal. This is game over. And I think he realized at that point, oh my goodness, maybe I went too far. Even this Zen guy is blowing it up. I just couldn't handle it anymore. I was honestly really that close to really hit him physically. Bad behavior for yogi, but that's life. So we both go into our separate offices and both with a sense of failure. His failure was professional, mine was spiritual. Professionally, I was a saint, nobody even went that far compared to me. But spiritually speaking, I didn't become Jesus on that night. It didn't work out and my love didn't happen. So we both feel really like, little losers in our offices. By the way, it's almost midnight. It's very late. There's nobody in the building. The only two offices lit is ours. And so we go out, and the worst thing is that I'm usually giving him a lift. So I have to wait for him. And then we come right in the hallway in front of our offices. What happened in my head? Don't ask me. Something just happened. And instead of hitting him, which I was less going to do now after a few minutes, I just told him, Bertrand, drop your briefcase. He had a briefcase. And I said, drop your briefcase. I don't know why I even said that. It just came out of my mouth. And his brain went, psh, he's going to kill me. He's going to kill me. He's going to come at me like that. So, and it happened like we don't know what's going on. So he dropped his briefcase. I came close to him. I could still remember his face, like ready for a fight. I mean, we're going to hit each other, no doubt. And I took him in my arms. I was not premeditating this at all. It just happened. I took him in my arms and I really squeezed him. And I said, Bertrand, really a great guy, I want to love you, but it's really hard. And we both started to cry, like emotions were just high. So we were just like that, crying in each other's arms, basically. It was almost midnight in this office. And I swear, I told you, I'm not exaggerating a bit, not 1%. Usually I like to exaggerate. This one should not be exaggerated. We were right in front of the doors of the elevator. It's midnight, squeezing each other, crying in each other's arms. The doors of the elevator went ding, and we both turned our head. Oops. We just thought, whoops, what happened here? So ding, and the doors open, and we both like expecting to be really embarrassed in one of the worst moments of our lives. Empty elevator, nobody in the elevator. So we started laughing, we just both laughed like crazy. Thinking, my God, good. Probably the janitor, pressed all the buttons and went out. I don't know. Just a scene out of a movie, really. So we were just squeezing each other. And, I just give him French people can kiss on the cheek, so I give him a big chance at Bertrand. I really love you. I really, really love you. You're an amazing guy. We should never do that again. Should never go through that hell again. This is fine. And I swear, on my mother's head, who passed away, from that day onwards, our relationship completely changed. We became really, it was still hard sometimes, but we would joke about it. I say, Bertrand, do we need to hug again in front of the elevator when we're not agreeing? We became very close friends, very, very, very close, very, very, very close. Everybody around used to tell me, Eric, how do you work with this guy? I said, he's a nice guy. You just need to go through hell, and then you'll figure it out. And when I left Alberta after 10 years in Alberta, I was still working with him, and still today, this is one of the journalists I have the highest respect for. He's the one who wrote me the most beautiful letter in my life. Honestly, I still have it. And it's not like flowers for bringing flowers. That was what we went through, humanly speaking. He knew it was unique, not just for his profession, but for his, internal journey. He was not spiritual, but his own internal growth. That was a link or connection I had with this guy that was incredible. But that scene was just so, yeah, that's what comes to mind when you talk about bringing love, in the workplace. It's a spiritual thing. And today, honestly, I can tell you, I really, really love people that I work with as people, as person, as soul, as human spirit, however you call it. Every time we talk, I start to feel, go beyond respect. Go into that spiritual love. It doesn't mean you kiss everyone and hug everyone all the time. It's just the vibration, the energy is more than respect. And it's true spiritual love. And I think humanity needs that. For me, this is what hope is all about. And the person who said we should go beyond voting with the dollars, it's true. We vote with our values as well, or we change the world on the basis of our values. And if more people start to really love each other on a spiritual level, is that not what all the prophets told us and asked us to do? Anyway, it's a long story.
Wow. Yeah. Oh, man. Wow. So sometimes this getting us to the edge, getting us to the real testing limits of our capacity is probably for us to transform. From that cracking comes something that is more fundamental and deepest part of us, and hopefully it is love and not something, not rage. And it's such a powerful story. And like you said, when that cracking happens, there's an opportunity for a new amalgamation, a new relationship, and a deep bonding that can occur that doesn't happen at superficial levels. Very powerful story. So I got one question. I think we have time only for one question. So here, Amina, the 16-year-old who joins us regularly, she's asking, how do you integrate the values of compassion, empathy in your news reporting? Thank you.
Well, for me, it's actually, I'm very lucky because I kind of specialized a little bit in the very human-based stories. So they know me for looking for the human side of the story. And I also have this great privilege, I think, to share some of my passion at work. So I share some training for what we call storytelling. And so this compassion, the feeling of empathy, feeling of caring, feeling of being human, sensitivity, the human sensitivity comes through with the storytelling based on human stories. So we have to look for the character. And one step in storytelling is the research. And sometimes people go for the first person they meet, which they find, oh, this is a good story, then we can do that. Or you are a key actor in that issue, so therefore I do the interview with you. I say, yeah, but okay. My point is often as a producer, I work as a producer as well. Well, is there somebody else that can tell us another story? So searching for who will tell the story and who is a good character is part of our responsibility. And I find that sometimes, news reporter or journalist producers are a little bit lazy sometimes in going beyond the obvious. So searching for another character in your story makes a big difference. I was listening to a singer. His name is Idan Rachel, or Idan Rachel. It's a Jewish guy from Israel. He's named the Artist of the Decade in Israel. An extremely talented guy. And I heard him after shooting in France, in Charlie Hebdo. And there was a French singer who was supposed to perform 3 nights after the shooting. And he said, I can't, sing in Champs-Élysées in Paris after this terrible tragedy. And someone said, no, you should sing, but do it differently. So he called this a guy from Israel, and they brought another guy, a Muslim guy. So there was a French guy, Muslim, and a Jewish guy, and they sang a song in one of the main theater in Paris. When I heard that, I mean, my skin when I had shivers, and I was like totally moved. So I called this guy, and I thought, why would he even talk to a totally unknown reporter from where? Canada, Montreal. So I sent a little, how they call a bottle in the ocean. And I ended up talking to his agent, and she said, yeah, he's busy, and trying to say no. But I said, yeah, it's a powerful story. I want to take a story about the bridge of hope. So anyway, she said, I can't guarantee. So she talked to him. I don't know, somehow he wanted to hear from me more. We ended up discussing. He returned to me at some point and said, his agent said, I don't know what you told him. He's giving you 3 days exclusive access in New York. No other media, just you for 3 days, and you do your story. Whoa, I thought he misunderstood me. I'm saying CBC, Canadian. He must have heard BBC, so he think I'm very important. When you realize not only I'm CBC, but I'm actually French CBC, very small audience. But we did the story anyway in French and English, so it's on the YouTube channel as well. Idan Rachel, A Hope of Bridge. And that story also changed my life because I saw the compassion in his eyes, the way he's been acting through music in bringing people together with forgiveness. I mean, if there's one spot on earth at the moment that breaks my heart all the time, it's this Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's really, really hard to watch. He is the only one who allowed me to really have to question my feelings, to be honest, for both sides. And he did it through music. I would have never thought of this character, but I just dared. And how it worked out, and the story is a very powerful story. And when he sees peace is not the absence of war. Peace is when you can go to listen to your favorite singer, even if he's in Afghanistan or in Baghdad or anywhere in the world. And peace is when people can come to Israel and listen to me and talk to me. So anyway, I think compassion, this kind of empathy is in the character, in the heart of those I'm going to interview. And they're not going to come to me. I have to go to them.
This is so powerful, Eric, that I don't know if you realize that you said what is really for you is an important subject. Amina's mom is Palestinian.
Oh, see, watch that story. It's on YouTube, even Rachel, Bridge of Hope.
Yeah, so go ahead and text it to me afterwards. I'm going to post this video and I'm going to put this in the description below. So this link will be circulated to everybody who's got hundreds of people watch it afterwards. So folks, thank you all for patiently staying in here. We went much over our time. Eric, thank you so much. You're an amazing, you were built, you were born for what you're doing, storytelling, and you're amazing at that. Thank you so much for sharing with us. Folks, tomorrow I have a dear friend. She's the head of well-being learning programs at Google for worldwide. Ruchika Sikri is going to be my guest tomorrow, so please join us. Until then, thank you all for being here today. Be well.
See you, everyone.